Hello everyone, it's Channin here for Waffle Flower Crafts. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to create a sequence rainbow using some scraps left over from a previous card video. I'll be using these waffle flower products today. First up is the In Every Way stamp set. This is a really beautiful sentiment set. I'll be using that In Every Way stamp. I'll also use one of the matching dies for this set. This is Awesome Word die. I'll be creating some clouds using the Across the Miles matching die set. And I again will need the A2 nested dome die to create my rainbow. Okay, so here are the scraps that I have left over from last week's card video where I made this shaker card. The video is called Nesting Dies Shaker Cards. And I used this A2 nested domes die set to cut out of 5 different shades of cardstock these 5 domes. These are actually the remaining pieces. I used the frame to create that shaker card I showed you earlier. So these remaining pieces, I'm going to use them to create today's rainbow. But I want this darkest blue layer here to just be a ring of the rainbow, so I have to trim this down. I'm going to sketch about 1/4 inch border here, and then I will cut this. I can't die cut this because there is no die that's that small, but I do want a ring. I don't want this big open blue space, so I do need to cut that out so it has like a ring. So now that I've cut those straight parts with my paper cutter, I have to cut the round part with a pair of scissors. Once I've got that cut, I'm going to put that interior piece aside, and I'm going to use that ring here. I'm going to give it about 1/4 inch border, a little bit less actually, and then hold it down with some tape, and then I will trace the interior of that blue ring, and that will just be my line for where I need to cut the inside of this green dome. I have to cut out the insides of all the domes, so all the remaining domes, the yellow and the red and the pink. I have to remove the interior of those so it does have this rainbow look. If I left it in there, it would actually kind of look like an elongated half circle. So I do need to remove the inside portions of these domes. I'm just now erasing the traced line on that blue ring that I cut, and actually on the green one I don't have anything to erase because I actually cut just past that line, pencil line that I drew on there. So that's how that's going to set up or be layered. Now I need to remove the center parts of the yellow, red, and pink domes. Now for this I can actually use the nested domes dies to cut out the center parts. I'm going to use the smallest die. I grabbed the second smallest die here, but I really need the smallest die. There we go. So I'm going to take that smallest die and center it in into this yellow dome, and then I'll use some tape just to hold it down, and then I will run it through my die cutting machine and it will cut out that inside part. Now I'm just going to remove that purple tape, and then that inside part, or that negative piece, is actually going to just put it aside. I won't be using that. So I've got 3 layers down now, or 3 rings of my rainbow done. Now I need to move on to my last 2 rings. So my last 2 rings, I'm actually going to do the same thing. So I'm using the smallest die again from the A2 nested dome die set, but I'm going to use that yellow ring. Just help me position that die right in the center. I just want to make sure that I have about 1/4 inch of a gap. So I have enough room to put my sequence on later. I want to make sure everything is centered. So I'm just using the previously cut dome to help me position the smallest die from the nested domes die set. So now I'm just again pulling off the purple tape, removing the center, not going to use that. And then I have one last one to do here. Going to use that red layer that I just cut, and then pop in the die in that negative space, and now I've got it perfectly positioned. I'm just going to use some painter's tape or some purple tape to hold it down, and then run both of them through my die cutting machine. And now I have all the layers done for my rainbow. So now I'm ready to glue them all together. I'm just going to arrange them here kind of in order, and I'll start with the blue layer first. I'm just using some liquid adhesive here. This is actually Mod Podge matte. I'm only using this just because it's in a fine nozzle, which is good for these thin strips, especially that blue one, which is the thinnest. And then I will continue to glue all these layers down so I have my rainbow complete. Now yes, I do have that bottom portion of the nested domes, or the dome, still attached to my rainbow, and I will cut that off later. I'm leaving it on right now. It just gives me something to hold on to while I glue all my sequins on there. So eventually that bottom portion of these dome will be cut off, and this will look more like a rainbow once I cut that off. So now I've got all the layers glued together. I'm now ready to move on to sequins. Yay! So I've got some tweezers, some Tombow Mono multi-liquid glue. I'm going to start by centering my rainbow using my grid, my work surface grid, and I want to start by putting that glue dot right in the center of that blue ring. I have 5 shades of 6mm sequins, one for each ring of the rainbow. So I have a blue, a green, a yellow, a red, and a pink. And I'm just, once I put a dot of glue down on the ring, I'll just cover it with some sequins. So it's a pretty simple process, and I just keep on moving down the line till I get about, I say, 2 inches of this rainbow completed. So now I'm almost done here with the blue section of my rainbow, continuing to put sequins right on top of those dots. I have one more row here, and now that blue section is done. Now I'm going to move on to the green. Again, centering my rainbow and putting that glue dot right in the center of the green arch. Now you can see here my green sequence doesn't quite match my green layer, but since so much of the ring gets kind of covered up with the sequins, it doesn't really matter too much. And I definitely prefer using these colored rings over just doing this on white cardstock, because there are still little gaps even though most of it is covered with sequins. And this way the little gaps are at least similar in color to the colored sequins, and it just has a more seamless look than if you were to just do this out of white cardstock. Now moving on to the red layer, so moving quickly here, just cutting out some of the parts so you don't have to see me build it because it's very repetitive. And because this is layered, these nested domes are kind of stacked up on top of each other, it's very easy to position these sequins because you can kind of tuck them right underneath the preceding layer. So if any, like here I'm moving on to the pink, so if any pink kind of butts up too much with the red, I can just kind of tuck that pink, the edge of one of the pink sequins right under the red, so I can perfectly position these sequins right where I want because these layers are stacked up on top of each other. So now the rainbow is completely done. I'm going to let it dry, and now that it's dry, I'm going to trim off the bottom portion of this dome, and so now it will really finally start to look more like a rainbow. I do later further trim it even more, but I stopped right there for now. Now I'm going to put that aside, and I'm going to move on to some die cutting. On the left here I have the Across the Miles matching die set. I'm going to use those clouds to cut 2 large and 2 small clouds. I've already cut out a set already. I'm going to cut out 2 more. I've got some mirrored gold cardstock and some white craft foam here. I'm going to use that awesome word die and cut it out of both the craft foam and the mirrored gold cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and position everything on the dies onto the cardstock, and then I will run it through my die cutting machine. Once die cut, I'm just going to pop out the awesome word and the 2 clouds and put those aside. Now all I have left to do is die cut that awesome word die from the craft foam, which I went ahead and did already. So now I'm going to move on to the last element of my card, which is the last part, or the second part of my sentiment, which I'm going to stamp and heat emboss this in gold embossing powder. This stamp just says "in every way," so the card will eventually say "awesome in every way." I've got some white cardstock here. I'm going to use Versamark ink to ink up my stamp. I really like this stamp set because it stamps the, typically you cut like a piece of cardstock, a strip, and then you stamp on top of it. Well, this kind of does both all in one. So you can see here how it's stamped kind of like the strip, and the negative is the actual lettering. So I think that's kind of a cool way to do a sentiment. So I went ahead and trimmed the sentiment after I've heat set it with, I just used a pair of scissors. And now I'm ready to assemble my card. So the first thing I'm going to do is glue the rainbow down onto my A2 card base. So this is actually 4 1/4 by 11, folded and scored at 5 1/2. I just used again some more of that Tombow Mono multi-liquid glue to glue down that rainbow. Then I will move on to the clouds. I'm going to kind of position the clouds here just to kind of see where I need to glue the two together to cover the whole base of the rainbow. Again, just using some of that liquid glue and then holding it for a second and then double checking, making sure it covers the base. Now I'll do the same thing with the other pair of clouds. And now I'm going to attach some foam tape to the back of the clouds. I'm going to put it at the very base of the clouds because the upper portion is actually going to be covering the sequin, so I can't put any foam tape there. Just removed the backing on the foam tape, and now I am sticking it down onto the card. So already looking really nice. Now I'm going to move on to my sentiment. So I'm going to take this mirrored gold word awesome, this die cut word awesome, kind of position where I want it to go, and I see here that the E to the part of the M is going to be, there's nothing to support it underneath, and it's going to be resting most of it on the dimensional clouds. So I need to cut this craft foam sentiment right at the E and the M and glue that right behind the gold awesome, so it provides some support for that middle section of the word. I'm going to set that aside now that I've glued it and let it dry a little bit and work on the second portion of my sentiment. So as you see here, it's going to go on that dimensional cloud, but part of it is hanging off. So that hanging off portion, I'm going to add foam tape to it and then just adhere it down, remove the backing and adhere it down onto the card. Now that the awesome is all dried, I have popped out any of the remaining negative pieces, and now I'm going to add some liquid adhesive all over, so onto the back of the craft foam and right onto the back of the cardstock, and then just stick it down. Hold it for a second to hold it in place while the glue kind of sets a little bit, and then this card is done. Just going to do a slight adjustment here to that in every way looked a little crooked, and then I will now hold this up to the camera so you can see it more closely. You got a lot of sparkle from all those different colored sequins and even these golden sentiments. So it's a really, really blingy, sparkly card, but I do really love it. I hope you guys enjoyed today's card video. If you want any more information on the products I use, please visit waffleflower.com, and you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for more creative ideas. Thanks for watching and have a wonderful day.